we're up the outside drop tower at DMM, and what we're going to do today is do some dynamic testing on slings. And the two slings we're going to use, 11mm Dyneema and 16mm nylon. And they both have different properties, and this will probably come out in the test. What we're going to do is use an 80 kilogram mass, which is what we use in the climbing standard for the EN tests, and do a fall factor 1 and a fall factor 2 fall. Full factor 1 fall, we've got our recording device up here, which will record the impact force. We have the sling, and we'll attach the mass here. And so what will happen is that the mass will fall 60, another 60 to make 120, and that will give you a fall factor 1. So it's not a huge fall. Then we'll do one where we take the full fall, height of the sling, so that's 120, it falls 120, and then another 120 to reach the bottom extent. And that's full factor 2. And then we'll do the same test again, but we'll tie just a knot inside on the sling in the middle, an overhand knot, something simple like that. Now the relevance of this in a climbing situation is that at a belay, people do quickly think, oh, I'll just attach myself, make myself safe, I'll just clip myself with a sling to the anchor point. And often there'll be a bit of slack in it. Now, is that important? And that's what we hope to find out today. In other words, if I fell off backwards with this amount of slack, is it going to generate much force? So we're going to record the test results here, the 80 kilogram mass. We're using 11mm Dyneema, and we're using 16mm nylon, and we'll do 3 samples of each test. First test, fall factor 1 with an open sling, 120 centimeters, and fall factor 1 sling with an overhand knot tied in it, and then fall factor 2 with an open sling, fall factor 2 sling with an overhand knot. Okay, so the whole point of the test today is to find out the impact forces generated in a belay situation where you might quickly clip into the belay with a 120 centimeter sling, and if it's irrelevant that there's any slack in that sling. The sampling rate that we operate on this test is about 1,000 samples a second, so we get a very accurate idea of what's going on in a very short space of time, and that's why we can look at, examine the impact forces and see how the slings are behaving. Well, we've got the results from the drop tower, the test we did out there, and they make pretty interesting reading. All the results are in kilonewtons, which is a measurement of force. So 20 kilonewtons is roughly equates to 2 tons. 2 tons is a unit of mass, whereas a kilonewton is a force, which is basically a mass that's moving. But anyway, 20 kilonewtons, 2 tons. That gives you a ballpark figure to play with. 10 kilonewtons, 1 ton. And the results we got here, they're all recorded in kilonewtons. And on some of the little squares where we filled in, we put a little star in the corner, and that's where the sling broke. So if we turn this round, we'll have a little look and see what we did. So form factor 1, open sling, 120 centimetres, and we did 3 tests on the 11mm Dyneema, and the forces we got, the impact forces, that's the highest peak loading force that we got from the 80 kilogram mass falling, was 23.2, 21.5 and 22.9, and there's actually a star next to that one indicating that that sling broke. So the reason why these impact forces are so high is because the climber, the 80 kilogram mass, when they fall they accelerate very rapidly, and Dyneema is pretty non-elastic, so it's almost like being attached to a piece of steel, and so there's no absorbency whatsoever in the Dyneema, and so you get these massive impact forces, and those forces on the human body would cause a lot of damage. And also 23 kilonewtons, 21 kilonewtons, 22 kilonewtons, they are very high forces, so you're looking at, you could possibly snap the sling. You're also getting close to the breaking strength of the aluminium carabiners. During the test we used steel carabiners because they're much stronger, so we knew they wouldn't break. And of course, if you're attached by a walnut or something like this, they're rated about 12 kilonewtons, so you'd easily break a nut or something that was in the crack. Okay, so when we compare the 11mm Dyneema with the nylon tests on this form factor 1 open sling, we've got 12.2, 13.1, 13.1, significantly lower impact forces and no breakages. Now the reason the impact force is so much lower is because that nylon has quite a lot more elasticity in it than Dyneema. It's still significant, bearing in mind that a typical leader fall may only generate between 4 and 7 kilonewtons. So we're already looking at very hard falls there if you were doing this in a falling situation. And we've only fallen, or the mass has only travelled 120 centimetres. We've tied a knot in this, and both cases, we didn't bother the third, we knew what was going to happen, but it broke the sling at a very low force compared with what it was surviving up here. And that's simply the effect of an overhand knot being tied into a Dyneema sling. It reduces the strength by that much. Now when we look at the 16mm nylon slings, this is a bit more interesting and a bit more difficult to get your head around really, but we suddenly see that the impact forces are actually reduced by having an overhand knot in it to when it was just an open sling. Now the reason for that in this case is the nylon again is absorbing, but since we tied a knot, it's acting rather like a shock absorber. So the knot is tightening, so delaying the high impact force. So it's an energy absorption, it's spreading it over time. So therefore the impact force is being reduced. Not by much, and it's still a high level. We're still at 10 kilonewtons, a ton in old money if you like. So tying an overhand knot on a Dyneema sling is pretty catastrophic. Tying one paradoxically on a 16mm nylon has reduced the impact force. We repeated the experiment with a full factor 2 on both the Dyneema and the nylon. So what we're getting here, the mass, the 80 kilogram mass has had 240 centimetres to accelerate, so there's a great deal of energy there. It breaks the 11mm Dyneema without any effort. The nylon, interestingly, does hold on the open sling, but at a greatly enhanced impact force. So we're at 16, 18, 17, so there are really big impact forces. And of course, if you tie a knot in, then the Dyneema obviously breaks, but also so does the nylon. And so here's an example of what it does. Here's the overhand knot. It's been completely crushed down on the Dyneema, and it's broken at the knot. That's where things break. And exactly the same is on the nylon. Okay, so we've been using 120 centimetre slings to do these tests, and you'll probably say, oh yeah, but I only ever connect onto an anchor point with 60 centimetre is much shorter. Well, we did that test as well, and with a fall factor 1, 60 centimetre sling, so that means anchor point, mass or U, 30 centimetres down, 30 centimetres up, that's a 60 centimetre sling. So you're only falling 60 centimetres, that's 2 foot in old money. Let's have a look at the forces. So, 16.7 kilonewtons. Now that is still a very high impact force. And then if we repeat the experiment with a 60 centimetre sling with an overhand knot tied in it, you can see that the sling broke, there's the little star, at 10.2. And so even falling that short distance, and here is the very one. So there it was, that's how it started life. Fell that distance, 10.2 kilonewtons, which is about a ton, and the dyneema broke out the knot. So even though you might think that that's not a significant fall, if you're attached directly to a belay, it is, and the forces are still great, and you will break equipment. So in summary, let's just recap. Having slack in the system is bad news. It only takes a relatively small fall, and the impact forces, the forces generated, rise rapidly. So that's bad news. There's a difference between nylon and dyneema. Nylon is more absorbent, absorbs more energy over time, and so it reduces the impact force. But dyneema is very abrasion resistant, and it's also very resistant to chemical attack as well. So we don't just dismiss dyneema, it has different qualities, different properties to nylon, and it's horses for courses. It is much lighter, much greater strength to weight ratio, if you like. And the falls you need to take to generate high forces are very small. If you looked at a 60 centimetre one, we fell 60 centimetres, that's only 2 foot, and we were breaking or generating very high impact loads, and indeed breaking a sling when it had a knot tailed in it. So knots, tying knots in, although not wrong, will reduce the overall breaking strength of your sling. And all these forces are all up, generally above 10. We're getting very close to where I think nuts, like walnuts, are rated at 12 kilonewtons. So most of these forces would have broken your anchor if you were directly attached to it via a sling. So the best thing is use a rope, because it is much more stretchy than either a nylon sling or certainly a dyneema sling. But you just have to be aware of what you're doing with slings. And there's nothing technically wrong with attaching the sling, you just don't have any slack in the system, and if you can, use a rope.